Please give this video a like and subscribe! If you know what's good for you, you'll follow us on Rumble.
But
then we will endeavor to do so.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Sorry, Alison. You were live while you were still talking. My name is Brian. I'm here with Alison and special guest Teal Deer, and we are talking more about this paper from Cambridge University. Toward individualistic reproduction, solving the fertility crisis could require a further marginalization of men. And first of all, I just want to say welcome to everyone to join that's joining the show, and welcome Teal Deer. How are you?
Well, I agree with the paper. You know, men are currently marginalized. Thank you for admitting it. That's wonderful. Now we just need to do it even harder, apparently, because that'll fix everything.
Yeah.
Actually, that is a good point. This paper has openly admitted everything we've been arguing about for 13 years, and myself for 20. Actually, probably 23 now. All right, that's progress.
Yeah.
Now maybe
it is wonderful when they just seed the ground of the argument immediately and then tell you why it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I've been pointing that out for years. They their first maneuver in arguments, and by they I mean the descendants of the Red Stockings Manifesto, the direct descent. I know that we can trace it further back. We can trace woke back to what were you saying, Teal Deer? August of Hippo.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of them, like Augustine of Hippo. There's who was the other sort of famous Christian writer? I know you've mentioned him before, Brian.
Saint Augustine?
Ambrose?
Not Ambrose, another one.
Oh, okay. Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas?
Yes, him, Thomas Aquinas and Augustine of Hippo. I have choice words for some of them and their Neoplatonist nonsense that infested the entirety of the intellectual canon of Christianity that would follow, which ended up giving rise to literally all of this. You know, that's the framework which gave you things like coverture, which gave you things like men have to be held responsible for everything that women do. And of course, feminism latched on to all of that as well and is still in the process of saying men are entirely responsible for everything bad that happens to women, except, of course, they then throw in their dual and triple system theory, as we discussed several weeks ago with people like McKinnon and Millet and Plummer and people like that, who basically just said, oh, by the way, husband is class, wife is class, man is class, woman is class. Men are the bourgeoisie extractor class, women are the proletariat productive class. This is all based around the bourgeois notion of the nuclear family, because we humans don't actually form natural pair bonding things, that there's a strange stripe. This is actually related to reproduction. I was about to go on a tangent, I just realized it's actually entirely connected. There was a stream of reproductive nonsense from feminism back in, I want to say about the 60s, might be a little bit earlier, where a bunch of their anthropologists came up with this bizarre notion that humans were not a pair bonding species, but that they reproduced orgiastically under the light of a full moon so that they could see what was going on, and something about lunar goddesses. I mean, when we do our evolutionary psychology and biopsychology, you know, we get accused of just so storytelling all the goddamn time when we're like, hey, this is what your endocrine system does when all of this stuff happens. They'll say things like that, but nothing to back it up. And then they'll accuse other people of just so storytelling about how humans do, which is hilarious. So they did that, and then that was their sort of slightly subversive means of undermining the family unit. Just like, no, humans, orgies everywhere. That's it. That's how they did it. No one knew what their parent. No one knew who their parents were. This is, of course, nonsense. Lineage has parental surety, specifically paternal surety, has, I mean, that predates humans. That is something that happened before humans were even human. Paternal surety is something you can see in animal species. It crosses clades, for God's sake. It is like such a ubiquitous behavior that the idea that humans are somehow immune to it is ridiculous. We know that humans are, best case scenario, pair bonding species. Kind of like the worst case scenario, you might be able to say like serial monogamy, with the potential to manifest the what is kind of amusingly called the sneaky fucker strategy, which is just kind of slipping in there when the female of a species is in the mood, and you just kind of slip in when she's a little unsuspecting or something along those lines, which is actually kind of an interesting I suppose a somewhat interesting side tangent for that is are things like pornography titillating for people? Well, it's because you're viewing people engaging in fornicative behavior, reproductive behavior, and there is a possibility at some point evolutionarily that you could just kind of get in there, like either at the same time or slightly after. And obviously that strategy works in a bunch of other animal species, where you do actually witness like two males trying to mount a female at the same time because she's receptive to mating, and it literally then just becomes a jostling match. You can see that with anything, like cows and horses and all sorts of other things. So chimps do it as well, so do bonobos. It's not really a surprise that humans would share architecture for that.
Can I get in here just a second, just to put one thing into your rant?
Okay.
Sneaky fuckers in nature usually are facilitated by resembling females. Is that not right?
Yes, they tend to be the demure males who are, to borrow internet parlance, so absolutely beta that they are femboyed. That's basically what it is. The femboys are the sneaky fuckers of humans, to give you an internet meme.
Because I've proposed the idea that our current dating landscape has women, essentially the sneaky fucker regime. They've just come out like full force and rearranged our mating landscape to their particular desires. But that's a complete aside. I apologize for interrupting your rant. Continue, Telter.
No, I did say I was probably just going to end up just info dumping at the front here, because I've not dealt with this paper or anything before, so I've got a lot of catching up to do in just random stuff that I need to get out to set scenes. So
yeah.
So that was kind of the first attempt to undermine the concept of family units that feminism engaged in, the sort of really big one. Humans not pair bonding, they're not sort of serially monogamous or anything like that. I think that those are kind of the two major models that you look at when you see humans, because we've kind of evolved a little bit beyond. It's not that we've evolved like beyond the sneaky fucking strategy, it's just that it's a lot more difficult because our brains are bigger, so we kind of notice it a little bit more. It just, I don't know how to describe it.
It's like an arms race between the sneaky fuckers and the rest of humanity, and the sneaky fuckers have had to get even more sneaky, which is why feminism. But continue.
Yeah, so that was a sort of really big attempt to undermine family unit formation. So if you take this back to triple system theory, which is what we discussed when we were talking about Walby and all of her nonsense, well, her collected nonsense from people like Millay and McKinnon, I think they're the two bigger contributors to all of this nonsense. The Marxist view, or Marxist feminist, but I repeat myself, view of the family unit was that it was actually a bourgeois construct. So what happened was you had the normal man, the proletarian man and woman, they used to just get it on anywhere, wherever, just orgies, just piles of writhing bodies all around the place. And then at some point, a couple of rich people with power said, you know, me and this woman, or me and this man, you know, the man and woman, they stood together and we said, no, actually, it's just us. You plebs can enjoy your, you know, sexual degeneracy over there. We're just going to be us, and we're going to know who our children are. And then this bourgeois notion that this is the family unit. This is what they actually believe, that family creation is this bourgeois, capitalist, patriarchal notion. And that was something that was then forced down upon the proletariat. It was forced down upon the filthy, orgy-having, degenerate hedonists that were the masses as a means of isolating them from each other, to help undermine class consciousness and to help undermine the sharing of resources, you know, pulling people out of primitive communism and forcing them into capitalism. This is why you get things like, where do I want to start with this? Okay, so you have within this feminist Marxist view of things, once again, I repeat myself, the family unit is this bourgeois construct, which is this unit of production. And within those units of production, you have still, because it's a microcosm of the bourgeois construct above it, it's inherited the bourgeois proletarian framework from the society that it's formed, that it's a part of. And within that, you have man as class, woman as class, husband as class, wife as class. So you then have men who are the extractive class, and women who, because women are the proletariat, they're the productive class, and men, because they're the bourgeois, they are the extractive class. So this is why you get feminists who have this bizarre view, and you see this all the time, unpaid labor. It's such a big thing for them. Women, they do housework, and the housework that they do, which is uncompensated, it's unpaid labor. So they don't get anything for it, apparently, you know, even though when you have those traditional arrangements, like one household income, which would normally be a man and then a woman working at home, that the payment there goes kind of one way, you know, one person stays in, gets everything provided for them. That was not the norm throughout all of human history. That was just sort of this really weird 50s Hollywood kind of blip that only really happened for like a small section of the post-World War II growing middle class. It wasn't achieved by most people. So this notion that, oh, man works, woman stays home, not throughout most of human history. The home was a unit of production. That is something.
Can I make a brief comment? All right, so now and I'm actually seeing something here. This is where I think they get because they baldly asserted that men having a wage was oppression of women. So providing for a woman is oppressing her because she has dependency on you, and that dependency is oppression. That's what I was seeing from the how they squared the materialist, you know, circle, which was, you know, with materialism you have to identify a benefit, and the Marxist feminists who were trying to identify a benefit, derive a benefit for men from patriarchy, which would be Brown, Bremer, Young. I think not Brown, Barrett and Young in particular, and they found a null. So what happened is they situated the benefit for men from the very act of making women dependent, which is really interesting, because if you think that this unpaid labor was the thing that men got from or extracted from women, why did men then pay for a laundry, like washers, dishwashers, clothes washers, like?
I can tell you that.
Okay, explain then.
Yeah, I can explain that within the Marxist framework. It all makes perfect sense if you don't think about it, and your brain is shaped like a pretzel with only one side somehow. Mobius strip, I suppose. So how that works, you've got the family unit, which is a unit of production. Women produce in the home, men exploit that. They take the additional labor, they take that labor value that women produce via washing the floors, cooking food, cleaning clothes and things like that. Apparently that stuff is all the thing that is actually keeping society together, because it produces so much value that these men then take so that they can go out and earn a wage, because them stealing all of this labor value that women are providing by cooking and cleaning allows men to go and do other things. That's the phrasing of it. Now, the bourgeois capitalist class that wants to exploit as much free labor as possible from people invented dishwashers, washing machines, and all of these labor-saving devices because, and I'm going back to the triple system theory from the book Theorizing Patriarchy by Sylvia Walby. People can go and read this to find out that I'm not making this up. This is their position. The bourgeois capitalist class created all of these labor-saving devices that do all of these jobs incredibly efficiently so that women don't actually have to work. You know, so your household work, instead of being hours a day, is like half an hour of pushing buttons, and then all the automated stuff does it for you. Okay, what they did was they invented all of these things, which created women as a consumer class, which means they can be exploited for their value, they can be exploited for their money, but it also means that they are a lot more productive, which means that there is even more value for men to take. But then it was all very sneaky, because there used to be communal wash houses and things like that people would all go to and scrub their clothes, or they'd go down to the river and bash everything with rocks, and obviously they'd talk to each other while they were doing that. Well, you see, those sneaky bourgeois capitalists, they took those communal activities, created this consumer class of women, and then isolated them in the home. They encouraged them to be atomized individualist consumers living in a home so that they would not meet with each other at these communal wash houses. Because if women were to meet together in communal wash houses, they might be they might possibly develop class consciousness. So all of these labor-saving devices were actually as a means of creating a consumer class that capitalists could get more money out of, somehow, from these women who don't produce money, but they somehow, don't question it. It made women work more efficiently because they can turn on multiple machines at once, which gives even more labor for the men in their lives to forcefully extract so that they can go outside and work. And it isolated women to be perfect little atomized consumer units locked away in a home so that they can't talk to other women and can't develop revolutionary class consciousness.
Okay, can I get in here for a second? All right,
Yep.
Two things, right? The labor that was saved by these devices, these consumer washing machine, dishwasher, and indoor plumbing, and all of the canned goods, all the industrial foods, did not go to the husband. It went to the wife, which then gave her time to enjoy soap operas and consciousness raising. Because I do note that when women were occupied bashing clothes on rocks, they didn't create feminism. But when they had the leisure time that they said that the capitalists inflicted on them, suddenly they had the time for class consciousness and all of these coffee klatches and marches and all of this other stuff, and time to think about how their boredom was oppression. I just wanted to point that out. It just doesn't, there's some flaws to Walby's, yeah, you're right. You can't think about it too hard. You just have to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Man bad, woman oppressed.
Yep, that's pretty much it. So all of that happened at the same time. So that ties into their notion that we now have to abolish the family unit. So we have to remove this bourgeois capitalist construct, which is this nuclear family unit. We have to, I guess, return to orgies under the moon, although I imagine they wouldn't go that far and actually cite whoever it was that first penned that, because it might, actually, no, I'm going to say it might sound a little too insane, but they wrote it in the first place, so no. And so this is why you get places that look for communal raising of children. This is why when you look at explicitly socialist communes, places like the kibbutz in Israel, a lot of the children there were communally raised and didn't know who their parents were. Some of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And because it was considered unequal if parents were to spend more time with their child than other people's children, because it was giving their child an unfair advantage. Because, you know, they might dote upon their own child a little more than someone else's, and therefore that child got some sort of boost from that. So even though there were some parents and children who they did know, there were a lot who didn't. Now, of course, the problem with that, this whole, we've all heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. It doesn't. It takes two parents and then usually an extended family, which would be grandparents and maybe first cousins. That seems to be the environment that the people work in, not just some rando down the street. So that is then where you start getting the socialist communal activity for all of this. So this is why, again, when you see leftists talking about everything is always, well, if we just have infinite community centers, infinite libraries, infinite community gardens, all of society will just work itself out somehow. People will just, all this inequality will go away, all the resentment, all the everything will go away. So this then puts you into, well, what we see now, which is all of these steps to attempt to emancipate people from, well, existence. That just seems to be what it is. Emancipate people from existence, emancipate people from reproduction, just separate people from reproduction at every sort of step that we go, has landed us where we are now, which is this incredibly low rate of fertility and the problems that is going to cause. Now, feminists have attempted to ameliorate this within their own framework, unsuccessfully, I would point out, but it's interesting to note their attempts at it. So what I think you're seeing, because I have paid attention to your past streams on this, and I don't think it's that I don't think it's that women don't want children in general. I think it's that they don't want them yet. So when you talk about, oh, women want this small number of high value men, yes. And it's not that women don't want children with them, it's that they don't want it now. So I think you're seeing different stages of women's lives, and perhaps there's a little bit of conflation there.
Can I just get in for a second? I really question high value men, because let's face it, these are the sneaker fuckers that they're going after. This is the sneaky fucker regime.
Well, they're the dark triad males, yes, who are the ones who tend to not do things and obviously the dark triad in the open.
Yeah, well, and the dark triad males, they have discovered, now this is early science because feminism has blocked a lot of science research into humans and endocrinology because it's too bioessentialist. It might actually give men a break from being the oppressors. But when they've looked into this, dark triad men, specifically sociopaths, they don't seem to have normal vasopressin. So they don't have the normal bonding system of a man. And then there's two types. One seems to have no bonding system, and the other, which is a dysregulated sociopath, is attempting to compensate for a lack of a male bonding system by, I guess, overdriving the female bonding system. So they have excessive oxytocin. And what they had found is that when they administered vasopressin to sociopaths, they develop empathy, intranasal vasopressin. I don't know if you were, I just wanted to point that out. So it suggests that actually what we are terming women being attracted to the alphas or the superior men, these are actually a small group of men who most resemble women, either in whatever bonding regime that they have left, whatever endocrine bonding system they have left, or without having any at all. And so they're best able to produce what women are attracted to, which is the sociopathic personality style, which apparently is a female personality style. And which is really interesting because in other species, the sneaky fuckers' big adaptation, their big advantage is they can emulate women. So I think what we're seeing is, like I said, the sneaky fucker regime. They're just open with it now. And women are attracted to it because they resemble the way that women bond. And they resemble the way that women bond because they don't bond the way men bond. So I resist calling these men superior, because I think that a human or a male that lacks some critical male parts isn't superior to normal men who have them. You see what I'm getting at?
Well, if you have a belief system wherein women are superior to men, you would think that a man behaving like a woman is better than the other men.
And yet, it is so much worse.
Yeah, apparently it's miserable. It's almost like women understand other women and they hate each other.
Well, it's the thing is that they still have the same kind of appetite as driven by testosterone, but they do not bond like men, which means they become very extractive. And I'm like, again, calling these guys the alphas, I think that we need to stop treating the dysregulated choices of women who don't experience any survival pressure as an indication of the worth of men. I'll put it that way. Anyway, I'd like, and please continue. Sorry, I just had to get in there because I really.
That's fine. I am going to go slightly into my fight me, Alison thing, specifically because, you know, you've pointed out how feminism attempts to limit female fertility, and I think that's an effect of it. But if you look at the things that they've done, they have attempted to ameliorate it. I don't know how half-hearted it is or whether they actually tried.
Yeah, go and elaborate on that.
Yeah, so there have been specifically feminist-aimed fertility experiments, feminist-aimed fertility clinics. Again, I kind of repeat myself when you look at the staff, the general leaning of all of these sorts of places. They are all feminist aligned. Planned Parenthood, which is normally what people think of, oh, that's the abortion place. You know, they do fertility stuff as well. People seem to forget about that bit. But there was the Sperm Bank of California. This was like back in the 80s. A part of their mandate was actually very specifically allowing single women and lesbians to have children, not gay men, just lesbians. That was specifically like a big part of what they were doing. They were like, oh, being a single woman and being lesbian shouldn't prevent you from being able to have a child if that's what you want. But they started running into a bit of a problem when they were running this clinic, and that was only a very small number of men were being picked. So they had all of their donor profiles, and apparently loads of the women were just picking this very small number of guys, to the point where they actually started having concerns that there was going to be inadvertent consanguineous relationships happening in the area that they operated, because so many women were picking such a small number of guys that it's like there's a bunch of half siblings running around who don't know that they're half siblings, and it like there's actually that many of them that it's going to potentially start causing problems. So they had to sort of find a way of dealing with that, lose a few samples, I guess, or just tell guys, yeah, we're not accepting from you anymore because too many women want you, I guess. So while these sort of feminist actions here, they do want like unlimited abortion rights. This is very obvious, but they want those early on in their life. This sort of lets them do the mindless hedonism that they want to do in their late teens and their 20s, you know, unlimited freedom, whatever they term freedom as, which means doing whatever the hell you like with no consequences for your actions, I guess. But at the end of all of that time, they still want the ability to have like a pair bonded, stable family at the end of it. It's like this really weird cross-purpose thing. You want to have all of the all the Chad Carousel fun with a decade or a decade and a half, but then still have this like loving husband, children, everything at the end of that. This is also why when you get leftists, the communists, the socialists, a really big part of their platform is also infinite free childcare. Businesses all have to run creches or nurseries or something like that out of their own pocket for women who work there. States have to provide nurseries, not only schooling. State schooling in itself was already the first move towards socializing the raising of children, and they just want that to be expanded. Private businesses are required to do these things. Private businesses are all required to give women certain amounts of weeks or months maternity leave, paid maternity leave, of course. So they want a state that can both aggressively pursue a single specific man, which would be the man who impregnates her, which we know that they can do. If you look at things like no-fault divorce and alimony payments, childcare payments, how massively disproportionate that is on men as opposed to women. Like, we know that the state will aggressively pursue a specific man who impregnates a woman, but it will also aggressively pursue men as a class to fund a woman's child. That is what all of this socialized childcare is about. And that is sort of a big part of the leftist platform on this. So they have attempted to do this thing where they encourage women to have children, but it's always basically saying, look, you can do it without a parent. We are going to give you resources, just more resources, more support, more money, more social programs, more everything, because that will make women have more children. But apparently it doesn't, and we know that it doesn't because, well, all you have to do is look at the fertility rates that's happening now in the UK. Fertility rates for single women is 1.8. Fertility rates for married women is around 2.1, 2.2. So what this actually shows you is if you want people to have babies, you want men and women to be getting married to each other. Now, what happens, and how do marriages work? Well, we know that when women earn more than men, the likelihood of that relationship imploding, it's an exponential increase. We know that part of the reason the wage gap myth has been dropped by feminists is because when you look at, I think it's women under the age of 30, maybe 25, 30, something like that. There's a bunch of fields and careers where young women are out earning men when you use those aggregate metrics like they did for the 77 cents to $1 lie. So they have to shut that down. They can't address that at all. You look at all of the DEI stuff that we're told is a conspiracy theory, even though companies have it all over their website. So we need to do all of this. We've got to have the diversity. We've got to get those ESG scores up and all that stuff. We have, in some cases, specific jobs that are literally just, nope, you need to meet these criteria to get these jobs. And it's always not white, not male, not Christian, not something. Where is all of this going to go? As it turns out, when you give women infinite everything with not only no dependency on men, the fertility rates crash. And of course, this was something that went in opposition to certain feminist theory, because there was feminist theory. Part of what helped to inform all of their fertility actions that they did try was this notion that if you emancipate women from men, if you free them from the reliance on men in the home, you're going to start seeing a rise of companionate marriages rather than economic relationships. Now, we know, if you look at, there's plenty of research on this, that it's something that feminists actually brought up not very long ago, that when the economy is bad, women stay in relationships for longer. Well, that's because they have more income, they have more stuff, of course, like it provides economic security. So you see all of this going together. It points out something very particular. If women have an excess of freedom, excess of resources, all this stuff, it doesn't result in these companionate marriages that were promised. It doesn't result in these women being super happy and super wanting to have children. It actually results in women who don't want that at all, which is really weird. And then you get papers like these ones, which you've been going through, for the past few weeks, which is just saying, look, if we just keep doing more of this, at some point the pattern will completely reverse. If we just give women more free stuff, more everything, more independence, and we separate them more from the other half of humanity that they need in order to have children, at some point they will return back to that half that we've completely separated them from in all terms imaginable, even at the base point of our Marxist theology saying, this is a point of oppression for you, that this half of humanity is going to steal everything from you. Don't go near them.
Yeah. Which is, yeah. I could go into the Marxist feminists and the argument that I saw, because it looks like the Marxist feminists, Bremer and Barrett and Young, actually attempted to derive male benefit from material analysis and failed, and actually said that they failed. Of course, they didn't question the idea that men gain benefit by providing for women. They simply said, oh, it's a secret benefit. But once you have that whole concept of a wage, giving men, or sorry, a wage providing for a woman as some kind of secret benefit to men, then everything else falls out. The expectation that businesses give women childcare, as well as other things that we've been seeing from feminism. But what I wanted to say is, and it's interesting, this individualistic paper says we should just give women more stuff. And of course, as you were describing, I'm not exactly sure when the fight me comes in, but as you were describing.
Oh no, the fight me was the when you pointed out I think it was the last show or the one before, where you said that feminists like don't do anything for fertility or anything.
Oh no,
like
that's
that.
not.
Oh no, they do, but it's just funny.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree that they have done that. My point is that, well, first of all, it sounds like that particular, like, it hasn't shifted the statistics on childbearing. It hasn't shifted it from married women to single women at all. Single women are they contribute about the same amount of childbirth as they ever have, while increasing in size. And so this is not a solution. And of course, this paper argues that doing more of that and encouraging women to be more single is a solution. So we marginalize men more to somehow make them to improve a situation that's caused by marginalizing men. Because when you marginalize men, they become unattractive prospects. Women don't partner with them, families don't form, and children don't happen. So, but what I wanted to point out is there is another tactic we could do. We could shame women for wanting a man who provides more. We could do that. Like, heavily shame women. Like, have poster campaigns, whisper campaigns, and just, not just gold diggers, but just regular women who have a partner who earns more. Just be like, I can't believe you did that. You're so exploitative. You're destroying the sisterhood or something. Whatever works for shaming women. But that's never proposed. You notice that? It's not even.
It never will be. Telling women to pull their weight never happens.
This paper, well, I would say that it did happen in the past, considering the dowry laws and the social expectations placed on that. If you've ever watched The Quiet Man, it's sort of an exploration of that. But it definitely doesn't happen now. So the idea is that if a woman doesn't bring anything into a relationship, she's a whore. And it was the Hollywood Madison Avenue house concubine thing that they did in the 50s that sort of got rid of that attitude, or reduced it quite a bit. So a woman could go into a relationship with nothing, provide basically nothing, have all of the domestic labor she was supposed to do given to, actually done by machines and industrial food production, and still be considered a respectable woman, when in most other eras she would have been considered a concubine. So the Hollywood house concubine. I was originally going to call it house whore, but that seems a little stigmatizing. So I figure house concubine is less insulting. But essentially, that's what they were doing. They were proposing a completely novel social arrangement in which the wife is not responsible financially for any aspect of the household, which again is completely novel. It's completely against how we structured the expectations placed on women in the past. Because, you know, Proverbs 31, go read that. That is considered to be a godly woman. She doesn't sit on her ass watching soaps, eating bonbons, having consciousness raising meetings with a bunch of predatory lesbians, right? She works, she provides, she invests for her household, for her family. You know, she has hospitality. She knows what she's doing. She manages the garden, whatever else. So that this is considered a lady, a woman, a respectable woman. She does not sell herself. So the big thing that Madison Avenue and Hollywood did in the 50s was get rid of the shame of that, of being a concubine. So, and created the whole concept of the house concubine, the woman who does not pull her weight, who just sits on her butt and consumes. And that's the big thing. Like, that is the harem model. It's the woman as luxury model. And that's not considered the respectable wife model that used to be. So, I mean, I just wanted to point that out. We used to do that. Hollywood and Madison Avenue got rid of that shaming because they wanted women to become consumers and to buy all these products and to essentially turn the United States from like more individualistic homesteading to very homogenous consumer society that could be sold to in mass. So I mean that I would say is something that we did do. We could bring it back. That's a possibility.
Good luck, because you're now fighting the tradcons as well.
Oh, I know.
Because the tradcons, they have bought into that. They swallowed that agitprop hook, line, and sinker.
Oh yeah, they're
my
100%.
wife, she will stay at home and she will do. That's where I want her. I will go out. I will earn things. She will sit there and push buttons on automated white goods and do the most difficult job in the world, raising my child, because, you know, the job that you literally hand to untrained 14 and 15-year-olds is totally the most difficult job in the world, guys. It really is. You know, when you go in for open heart surgery and someone says, oh, sorry, yeah, Dr. Smith can't come in today, but, you know, we've got 14-year-old Jennifer here who's going to sub in for your bypass. Yeah, that doesn't happen. Yeah, your hardest job in the world is actually pretty fucking light duty. It's not as difficult as you think it is. Stop fucking gassing yourselves up like you're doing the most difficult and amazing thing that humanity has ever done.
Well, but the whole thing with the radfems is they are making it possible for the rest of the world to run, rather than being the most leisured and comfortable and supplied with luxury class in the whole of human history. They're the ones who are bearing the world on their shoulders, and they're not. They are the beneficiaries of a progressive narrative from the 50s put on by a bunch of probably sexual libertine degenerates. So the very first act of queerdom was the house concubine. I'm just laying it out there.
They've turned women into Medea.
Yeah.
Act 1, Medea. All of this is around me. Men have built all of this society, and yet I am still sad. They have not fixed my emotions for me.
Literally what it is. Like, if you look at the Red Stockings Manifesto, they said feeling, then theory, then practice. So all of this starts in the resentment of the most leisured and beneficiary, the most safe, secure, comfortable, and leisured class in human history. Discovered that their boredom was oppression, developed resentment, then groped around for a theory to explain the source of their resentment, never considered themselves, placed it on the men giving them the luxury and the freedom, and then Bob's your uncle. Now we're dealing with what we're dealing with now. All right, and that actually explains a lot, because if you think about it, the paper basically says that men should continue to labor, continue to supply their taxes to women. Well, what's the justification for that? How do they justify that morally? And the obvious answer is that they have classified men working as their precondition for oppressing women. So when you say that men, in a relationship, so man works to support a woman in order to oppress her through that support. So basically what they're saying is that there's no legitimacy to a man working in order to be in a relationship with a woman, because that's how he oppresses her. So there's no justification for that. So men should. Woof, Jojo's definitely having commentary now.
The garbage man is getting stuff. I'm gonna mute.
Jojo is oppressed by the garbage man. So once you frame it that way, that men create dependency by using their wage in women, or don't create it, but they serve the dependency in women, and that is oppression, then men have no justification for stepping up and saying, hey, we're working in order to provide for a family. So they're basically saying, hey, we're working in order to oppress class women, right? So men are obligated to hand their wage over to the state. Otherwise, they're oppressors for women. Otherwise, they're oppressors. So it's not really slavery. It's correcting oppression. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, as I said a little before we came on air, you can point this back to Christian morality and coverture. Women must submit to men and men must provide everything. This is just a logical outgrowth of that. This is another reason why I tell people, look, the tradcons are not your friends on this topic. They never will be.
Well, they're not even particularly traditionalists.
No, they're not. They're progressives from 100 years ago.
Yeah, from 40 years ago. Like, they're progressives that are one generation older than the progressives we're dealing with now. But yeah, because they've enshrined the idea, again, when I point this out, I think people maybe don't understand it, but it used to be that in order to be a good, respectable woman, you supported your household. Now, maybe you didn't do men's work because you're physically incapable of it, but you did the work that you could do. So, household work, gardening work, shepherding, whatever. You did the work you were capable of, weaving, brewing, making cheese, right? But in order to be a respectable woman, you contributed to your household. And I think that's actually true in traditional cultures now around the world, which is why women in those cultures actually, in many cases, end up in more male-typed jobs. But I'll set that aside. The idea was, in order to be a respectable woman, you did have to contribute to your household, just like an adult man did. And Madison Avenue and Hollywood took that, removed the shame of it, of being just a kept woman, and then this is the new traditionalism. No, it isn't. That's like the first kind of step away from a traditional morality, right? Because if you think about it, then you make marriage into something it never was. It's not really marriage anymore. It's concubinage. And of course, the tradcons defend that because they don't see it was the first queering of marriage. The first turn away from what was traditional and respectable towards luxury and indulgence and selling sex for money. And it's just it's slightly infuriating, but you're absolutely right. They're not traditionalists. They're not really conservatives. But then again, the economy being what it is, I suppose those people who can do it. I mean, we've
a symbol for them if they can. That's the only reason they do it.
Yeah.
Look at me. I am the best provider. I am the best covertism guy.
All right. So
I have the covertisms. I take care of women the bestest.
And again, that's I I mean, it used to be that, yes, men have that kind of instinct, at least from what I've been looking at in terms of endocrinology and how we evolved and what we likely evolved to reproduce in terms of our social relationships. But do people really think women did nothing throughout all of human history?
Well, a worrying number of them seem to have convinced themselves that yes.
Okay, is Brian? Has JoJo?
Yeah, no, he's been quiet for a while, but you guys are going, so you know.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it back to what I was originally saying, which that was like almost 40 minutes ago, which was
50.
Oh, actually 50 minutes ago. What I was saying was that that the individuals in this paper are inheritors. So when I say they, I mean everybody who inherits the ideology of the Red Stockings Manifesto. So if you want to know what our current society, the lines of our current society, just go read the Red Stockings Manifesto, because their manifesto became the shape of academic feminism, which became the shape of social policy and law when it comes to the relationship between men and women. Anyway, so that's what I say. That's what I mean when I say they. It's just the group that descended from the Red Stockings Manifesto. And many of them don't even realize that they did. But that manifesto is feminism now, is current day feminism. So if you believe, and current day feminism is the left. So if you are on the left, that is what you're promoting. So go read it, inform yourself. See if you actually jive with what the left is really about. And when that document became the gospel of the left, that's when approximately, at least coincidentally, the left stopped being as fertile as the right. And that doesn't mean that I don't call out the right. Obviously, we just did. But it does mean that the epicenter is in the left. It's just that the right is somewhat sheltered by it. In terms, and what's sheltering them, interestingly enough, is their Christian faith and to some degree their economic conservative focus. So that's the only reason why the right still has a higher fertility than the left. And they get married more often. So, but still, the right is still, when I say they're somewhat protected, they're still in the same blast furnace. They're still being burnt away, right? So they're somewhat, I don't want to say immune, but they are somewhat protected, but the protection itself is eroding away and eventually will be gone. And then we are all going to be facing the ruinous crater that the left created in our ability to have children by pair bonding, or to pair bond and then have children. All right, so do you want to read the paper, or did you have more to say to that?
What are we here for? Are we supposed to be reading something? That's crazy.
Do you have anything further to add to that, Tildir?
Great many. Remember when I said I'm going to front load this with everything?
Yeah.
This I'm still.
Did you
loading.
get everything out?
Nope,
Did you get everything?
Even close. Not even close. So I do want to. I know that I'm going a little on here, but it is related. If you ever want to see how this goes, there are potential short circuits to this, which some people have talked about over the last few years, and that is the ability of things like sex bots and artificial wombs. These things will not happen. If you look at feminist messaging around these things, they take a very interesting tact, and that tact that they take is this is an attack on women's autonomy over fertility. They will never give that up, which is why you are never going to get it. Sex bots and artificial reproduction, this will not happen. It might be a potential short circuit to this insofar as it would allow men to bypass the broken standards that women seem to be increasingly displaying. Insofar as, you want someone who is economically better off than you, but everything about the economy makes sure that that can't happen. But as a result of that, it's never going to happen, because at some basal level, and well, this is somewhat a theological level, I suppose, reproduction is this thing that is just the domain of the female to the feminist movement. It is their one trump card. It must never be taken away or challenged. It must be entirely in their control at all times.
Okay. Alison?
Oh, I was muted. If we can't even question the things put in place to create the marginalization of men, and prevent the formation of families, we're never going to be able to challenge feminists on the monopoly of reproduction that they want to keep women for women. So yeah, that's yeah, there'll be sex bots, but they'll be feminist. This is something I said years ago, and I remember there was viewers who got upset with me. And then a couple of years later, the feminist AI girlfriends that refused to let go of their feminism came out. Yep, that's sure. You could have sex bots. Probably not. You won't be having the ability to reproduce, but those sex bots will be training you to be good feminist men. You don't think that's going to happen? That's literally going to be the condition that they make to allow it.
Yeah, because if you look at the attitude around them, it's, oh no, this is dangerous, it's misogyny, it's teaching men to treat women like objects because it's something that just exists for their enjoyment, and that's it. It never says no. I do ask these women, it's like, do you ever ask if your dildo is interested, or do you just presume that that's the case? Because it's no worse than what these guys are looking to do. But yeah, if they allow it in any way, it is going to be on the condition that there is some sort of brainwashing AI. The weird thing is, some of the, not the brainwashing rad fem nonsense that they're going to put into it, but some of the bots have actually said, like, yeah, no, we're actually looking at like having some sort of AI model in them that would actually require some degree of wooing. In other words, like not actually being treated like an object, because apparently men actually prefer that. Which I think, when you look at reproductive behavior, or the drive for reproductive behavior between men and women, I find that very interesting, that men are in the process of trying to recreate an entire human. They want the whole thing. They want the body and the brain and the thing that's going to talk to them, and it's got realistic tactile flesh and is warm and seems to breathe and talks, and does things and gives them feedback. Women just they just want the dick. That's the only bit they want. And half of them look like you fed Viagra to a cuttlefish. They're an abomination. But that's all they want. And people aren't ready to discuss what those facts mean about men and women.
Yeah. Okay. So, did you want to continue or get everything else out before we continue to read?
The only other things that I'm going to point out about fertility crises, it comes down to how much of this do you want to lay at the feet of feminism directly versus how much of it is just a product of modernity. Now, the problem is modernity and feminism go very much hand in hand. Wherever you find modernity to our technological level, you always find feminism. It seems to just be something where this kind of behavior, this pattern, is just humanity existing within an environment. It's just humans expressed in the environment that we've created, because this crosses economic lines, it crosses religious lines, it crosses geographic lines, it crosses economic model lines, it crosses ethnic boundaries, religious boundaries. People like to make the joke about things like, oh, Islam is right about women. Well, if you look at things like Islam's divorce rates, they are anything up to 90% the same rate that they are in the West. If you look at their divorce, the customs of divorce, having to pay things like the meher bride price, that thing keeps men enslaved for decades after divorces happen. They effectively have like no fault divorce in those countries as well a lot of the time. It's these ideas that you can get around this. No, again, it just seems to be a product of modernity, and no one is going to hold women to account for this. So you look at like the fertility rate in places like North Korea, which is of course best Korea. They have, I suppose this is another somewhat aside, people like to sort of say, oh, the antinatalist propaganda. The antinatalist propaganda is the thing that's stopping women from having babies. I have to say, humanity has gone from 1.5 billion to nearly 8 billion in 150 years. If antinatalist propaganda is stopping people from having children, it is objectively the shittest propaganda that has ever existed, because apparently it does nothing. But you've got places like North Korea where they have pro-natalist propaganda literally everywhere. Kim Jong-un has to literally get on his knees and beg women to please have children. They throw the entire weight of the state behind it. You get millions of benefits, and they still don't do it because society just is as it is, and it just seems to be you put humans in this environment, that's what happens. And I'm gonna unfortunately have to again point out how the tradcons are not your friends. I'm calling them tradcons. I've kind of managed to remove tradcuck from my vocabulary. I'm trying to cross to build the bridge, even though I'm constantly telling them that they're wrong whenever I call them tradcons. Anyway, so to point out why they are not going to be your friend on this, they'll like to talk about how, oh, we need to give women infinite resources to have more babies. Like, have you ever seen this? They say that a lot. We need to pay people to have babies. Well, this is exactly what this individualistic reproductive paper is doing. You know, we need to raise more of the economy and give more of it to women. You already do that. There's sort of the Schrodinger's baby problem when it comes to the tradcon model here. You know, immigrants can come into your country and they can have 10 kids and live on welfare for the rest of their life, but apparently we don't pay people to have kids. Which is an interesting way of looking at it. I did actually once crunch the numbers on this. By the time you consider in tax contribution versus welfare taking out, because obviously there's a slew of benefits that you can get just for having children. If you actually look at it, people without children effectively have about a 25% tax rate, and people who do have them only effectively end up with about a 20% tax rate once you take into account all of the rebates that people get for having children. So we literally do already pay people to have children. It's just that the tradcons say we need to give women more in order to have children, and now we've got seemingly more feminist aligned authors saying we need to give women more stuff so that they can have children. I'm going to be the person who just says, no, let's not continue doing the thing that we've been doing for 200 years now, and just hoping that if we do it harder, things will mysteriously about face and start going backwards. Why don't we just stop doing this and maybe not do it? Like, maybe we don't do it harder. Maybe we could not do it. Maybe we could reverse it. Maybe we could take a step back here. Yeah, that might be cool. Maybe we could take stuff away from women and give it to men.
Just give men back their stuff.
Yeah, maybe if we gave men back their stuff, maybe if we didn't tax men to the hilt on everything so that they had more money, they'd be more attractive prospects, and women would look at them and go, oh, he actually has stuff. Oh, maybe I can get with him. I know it's sexist and it's terrible, but apparently we just have to be sexist and terrible to women in order to, make men attractive to them. Apparently that just seems to work.
Yeah, for some reason in every other context, when one person gives another person money, we think that it should be voluntary, except when it comes to men and women. Men should be obligated to give their money to women without any kind of personal relationship with that woman. And if they don't want to do that, it's entitlement and oppression of women. I find it remarkable. I did want to get in, and maybe we can find some fight me here. The ex-Soviet bloc countries had a fertility rate of approximately replacement, so 2.15. Before the World Bank and European Development Bank got in there and started to give them loans to develop their economies, and of course, infect them with feminism. at the same time. And that's Western brand feminism, because these ex-Soviet bloc countries had high degrees of female workplace participation and employment, income, and also education, but they still maintained at replacement rate fertility because they hadn't adopted the Western condemnation of men in marriage. To ironically, the communism of the Soviet Union was actually pro-natal and pro-family, which is probably why it functioned even for the length of time that it did. So what we're seeing is there's like I wanted to point this out. There's two different almost kinds of feminism: the woman economics feminism, which gets womenomics feminism, which gets women into jobs and education, and then there's the Western house concubine feminism, which is all about resenting the man who's given you the life of luxury. And the Western feminism is actually the one that craters fertility, because even though they were at replacement, that's usually what happens with the development. Is at least in the ex-blocs country, they were at replacement even after supposedly development to a second world status. It was the importation of feminism that cratered their fertility, and that's the same thing that happened in South Korea as a result of the Asian crisis. Now, with the East Asians, the type of marriage regime or pairing regime is it's called Ma'ai, I think. It's called the marriage package, which is a matchmaker plus the social obligation to get married. So it's almost like getting a job. But when you introduce Western feminism into that, and then you put in also the modernization, get rid of the matchmaker, and what happens is you're taking marriage from a social obligation to a fraud almost. Like it's a imposition on women, and there's nothing else in their society that buoys up marriage as a good. Once it loses its cachet as a social obligation and it becomes oppression of women, there's no floor there. It just keeps going down and down and down. Marriage implodes, and with it goes down the fertility of the nation. So that's what's happening there. What's happening with the Gulf states is, yes, they have problems, but they have kept their custodial laws. So men are still in a custodial position with women in regards to women. So they have, I guess, similar laws as to coverture. So men are responsible for women, but they also have some control over their families. It's like paired still there. And that's what's keeping their fertility up, because the kin selection, which is a rider on the male custodial laws, usually they come parcel, is keeping them in marriage, like keeping marriages going. The problem is that the fertility is declining within marriage with the kin selection cultures. So, I mean, I don't know if you heard the long thing I talked about how there's like different regimes of relationship formation around the world, and how each one reacted to modernity. Because you're right, like when we import post-industrial economy, when we start to become a post-industrial economy, we see declines in fertility everywhere. But there are still places that manage to retain at replacement level, like the ex-Soviet bloc countries. But then you see the importation of Western feminism, and then they start to decline. And then, so anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Did you hear that the first time I talked about it, Tilder?
If I did, I don't remember it.
Oh, okay.
Well, essentially, my memory is generally awful, but we'll see.
Okay, well, let me lay it out. Essentially, there are 4 different marriage or partnership formation regimes around the world. The one that we talk about a lot is, or at least in terms of condemning it, is the male custodial kin selection form of marriage, which used to also be very strongly cousin marriage, because they were trying to keep family wealth within the family. And that's it's the Caribbean, which was more matrilinear, and then the Gulf states, which are very patriarchal. Like the Caribbean has completely cratered, so we won't talk about that. But the Gulf states have retained their custodial laws and their and because they've retained their custodial laws, they've retained their kin selection regime of marriage formation, which means their fertility, while declining, isn't being hit as hard by modernity as everywhere else. However, we also have the social obligation plus matchmaker system, which is the East Asian system, so Japan, Korea, China, and their fertility is totally flooring. Like it's declining, except for Japan. Japan is actually maintaining better than anybody in East Asia that's at post-industrial civilization. So we have Japan at 1.2, we have China at 1, and we have Korea at 0.7, South Korea at 0.7. I don't know where North Korea lies. I haven't actually looked that up.
Well, I don't think North Korea is very forthcoming in sharing that information.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's probably extremely difficult to get it out. So what happens with a marriage matchmaker, a social obligation culture, and Korea is the example of this, is again, when you get rid of the matchmaker because of modernity, and then you get rid of the social obligation because marriage is now an oppression of women, so you've stripped all of the social respectability of it out, then your marriage rates completely crater, and with them go your fertility rates. And but with the Gulf countries, and what's interesting about all of this, and I apologize, this is another tangent. What's interesting about all of this is it rides on whether or not a nation is a creditor or a debtor in the global economy. If you're a creditor, like the Gulf nations, you get to keep your custodial laws. If you're a debtor, like South Korea, you lose them because the World Banks come in. They bring in the feminism to break up your custodial system, which makes you more attractive for international investment. So to use the specific example of South Korea, they used to have these family, not cabals, these family cartels. And that family cartel system rode on this social and legal policy of male custodialship. So the men involved in these cartels were expected to be employed for life, but you can't turn a company like that without a mobile workforce into a global good, a good for sale in the global market. So they broke that custodial expectation. They broke the laws that supported it. They through so-called gender equality, which was really about just extracting the value from these companies. And so they just rammed feminism hard into South Korea to break the cartels. They did, but of course, this new generation of female South Koreans is absolutely poisoned by it. And even when they're starting to try to fix the issue by bringing in new marriage matchmakers, like they've tried to in South Korea, they're trying to follow the Japanese model, which the Japanese created these modern digital matchmakers, which are working. So South Korea tried to do it, and the 4B 2B or 2B 4B movement, the radical feminists in South Korea, actually are campaigning against it or destroying it, destroying the matchmakers, which are completely voluntary, as expressions of patriarchal oppression. So South Korea is trying to heal, and the rad femmes are destroying it. They're actively campaigning against it. And what's interesting about Japan is their form of feminism was more of the Soviet womenomics kind of feminism. So when their post-industrial system, like they lost their matchmaker, they still have the social cachet of marriage. And then I also think they imported the third form of marriage formation or relationship formation from the US, because there's a lot of cultural transference. And the third form of marriage formation is the romantic Christian model, which incidentally, Christians were the first companionate marriage, the first proponents of companionate marriage. And the idea that the two parties need to consent after a courtship That's the Christian model, which is the North European and the Southern European models, and all of the states that have the colonial states that came out of those cultures. So Japan has sort of imported that from the US, that kind of, I call it a romantic relationship model, but I know that has a lot of baggage. Maybe I should call it the companionate relationship model. But they've imported a lot of that cultural transference from the US. So relationships themselves, and then they also have like an interior, like a culture around the interior, like the emotional interior, which romantic love can sort of ride on. So they've imported that cultural tradition, which fit in well with that native interior sort of cultural aesthetic. And I think that they maintain their 1.2 because they do have an appreciation for romance, as well as they don't have radical feminists trying to destroy their matchmaking services. And their matchmaking services are very much different than like Tinder here. They're very much about forming relationships, forming marriages. They're very serious about it. It's not about finding hookups. All right, but if you go to the third relationship regime, that is companionate marriage, and it's something that the Christians brought into Northern Europe and Southern Europe when they were moving out from Rome. And the attraction, I think, for it is that it's actually much closer to what I think the original form of human relationships were, with a courtship and the pair bonding, and the idea that the relationship itself is a good, is a value. So in other cultures, it's not that they don't develop affection. Men and husbands and wives don't develop affection. It's like the relationship is downstream of the kinship connection or the matchmaking and plus social obligation. Whereas for the companionate, the relationship comes out of the meeting of the man and the woman. Does that make sense? Like, am I explaining this in a way that makes sense? Have I completely lost everyone? All right. Hello? Am I still here?
Well, I mean, I'm here. I don't know. I thought I was giving Tildeer time to. I wasn't listening though, Alison. To be honest, I was looking at the chat.
Oh, okay.
Because they've been sending through a bunch of super chats and stuff. So
okay, we got to address those. But
yeah, I do.
If I'm not belaboring it too much, do you get what I'm saying, Tildeer? Or
yeah, there's just a bunch of ways of dealing with relationship formation.
Yeah, but each of them have responded to modernity differently, and with varying degrees of resilience. The matchmaking way has cratered for the most part. The kinship way has maintained itself, but only because it's in creditor nations that can resist the feminist colonialism of the world banks. And the European way of Christian relationship is actually turning out to be the most resilient, interestingly enough. But again, I would say that it's modeled closest on the original pair bonding, like the what we would have seen in a more archaic situation, which is that the pair bond arises from the relationship between the man and the woman, or the interaction between the man and the woman, not from kin selection and not from marriage brokering. So, but that requires a courtship, and it also requires male approach, which means that if you stigmatize male approach and courtship, you destroy it. And unfortunately, that's what feminists are doing. Okay, so that's the. Did you want to comment on that, Tildeer? Maybe we should.
Well, a large part. I'm just going to say it's about it being something pre-existing. Yes, part of the reason that Christianity spread into Europe quite effectively was because some of its moral principles were already there in Northern European paganism. Anyway, there's quite a bit of shared just morality anyway, because there were marriage arrangements. They did work in very much the same way or very similar way. A lot of their religious ceremonies were very similar as well. And of course, if you're polytheistic, Oh, look, another god. Cool. We like that.
Okay,
Okay, let's get to reading.
I
the
gotta do
super
some. I
chats.
gotta read these super chats and stuff, and some of them are questions. So I'm not sure how much of this we're gonna get to because I
None of
got a
it.
hard out at 3. So, but Richard Bier gave us $5 and says, for every invention that is a labor-saving invention, there will be new work to occupy the newly freed time in which the invention was developed by completing the work more easily and efficiently than before. The earliest farm tractors weren't equipped with headlights because the notion was that all of the farm work would be completed before sunset. Also, look at the ballooning of the bureaucratic office cubicle farms that evolved after the computerization of administrative functions, in which the computers were supposed to streamline and reduce the amount of paperwork. Nowadays, the offices have turned into Rube Goldberg machines that, in order to justify a bloated payroll, will find the most complicated way to carry out the simplest of tasks. That does go down the path where you experience the customer service where multiple levels of senior managers just repeat the exact same thing that the previous agent said, because apparently the previous agent didn't say that exact same thing with the proper inflection, and the customer service experience becomes the Indian call center, or perhaps the Indian airline that loses a parked 737 at an airport for 13 years. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. There's no other commentary. Dark Kikimura gave us $5 super chow and says, it's always a fun time when feminists show you news articles that try to somehow argue women are more negatively impacted by divorce than men, and you tell them that if they were true, they would be proving women benefit from the actual marriage more than men. Yep. Okay, and I got 3 super chats, so I'm going to read those. One, they're all from Master Goa, gives us $5, $10, and then $5 respectively, and I'm just going to read them. So, women working would just be them being oppressed by their boss instead of their husband. They are just switching their oppressor to likely another man. Yeah, that's true. Then he says, feminism is the core of leftism. The truth is that feminism is just about emulating men or trying to become them. That's why TERF are the radical outliers. Feminist ideal women are actually men. Feminist ideal women are actually men. Just jump in if you want to say anything to any of these super chats and stuff. So I'm just going to keep going.
I don't think that feminist ideal is actually men. I think that they have incredible contempt for men. They think that well, first of all, they don't acknowledge that men have a custodial nature, and the reason why men do the jobs that they do is to provide for their families. And there is no secret benefit. It's just a secret instinct or secret virtue to want to provide benefit to your wife and children. That's it. And they've constructed from that a secret benefit to the man in being seen as a man. And so what they want is they want to smash that by taking the roles that men, under the assumption that men are getting something from them, which is a false assumption. What men are getting is the ability to provide for their families. But the feminists are like, oh, they're getting the oppression points, and we want the oppression points. So it's not really wanting to become men, it's wanting to gain the benefits that they assume men have. And then also engage in the behaviors that they've falsely attributed to men, because men aren't rewarded for being crass and abusive and selfish and everything else that feminists say that men are rewarded for. But they say that men are rewarded for those things so women can feel free to do those things. Literally, feminists don't want women to become men. Feminists want women to have access to all of the things they falsely say that men have access to, because they refuse to acknowledge what manhood actually is. It is an obligation, not a benefit. And because they refuse to acknowledge that, and they see it as license to act in the worst and most appalling ways possible, which it isn't, and it never was, but in their framework it is. That's what they're encouraging women to do. They're saying that women are excluded from their snidely whiplash stereotype about men. So I would say that the feminists don't encourage women to be like men. And when you frame it that way, you're actually buying into how feminists lie about men. Because if feminists were encouraging women to be like men, they would be encouraging women to take responsibility for their families. They would be encouraging women to behave in moral ways, to judge themselves based on their behavior towards their husbands, right? All of the things that men actually do. That's what feminists would be encouraging in women. So when you say feminists encourage women to act like men, you are assuming the feminist stereotype about men. And that assumption is false. So don't do that. That's all. That's what I'm saying to that commentator. Don't do that, because you're actually allowing the feminists to set the frame there. And if feminists actually told women to act like men, that would be improving women. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that misogynist enough? All right, let's go to the next one.
All right, next one. Master Goa again. He says, when I use Twitter, I like someone Brian's probably encountered, Eve Cananian, whatever. I think all of you on a panel with Eve could be a good conversation. Yeah, I'm not aware of who that is. I don't think I've ever encountered them. And I haven't been on X in a while because somebody stole my account. So, all right, now Rumble rants. NovaFan21 gave us $1 and said, "Got to push back on Alison's claim that we can bring back women who provide, as the habit to be this lazy is too ingrained. The more likely solution is harem-induced productivity to secure resources."
So basically, what we have now. Well, first of all, the assumption is that we can continue to provide this level of comfort for women. And unfortunately, that's not an assumption that's borne out by history. It'd be nice if we could just not have the problems of the harem, but it seems like every time there's an empire that gains any bit of luxury or ability to provide surplus, the relational web, women's relational web lifts from the substrate of resources, of providing resources, gets up its own ass, and then crashes the whole thing. And usually it's based on harem thinking. So if you say that to solve the problem of having this harem mentality, women's addiction to luxury and just being able to not have to do anything, not have to be in relationships with men in order to get anything done or to get what they need, or to even get and it's like, when I frame it that way, it sounds exploitative. It's like, oh, women are forced to be in a relationship with a man to get what they need. But women have evolved to depend on men and to find a dependable man attractive. So when you create a culture in which the average man cannot present himself as dependable to the average woman, then you create cratering fertility rates, and the solution isn't to make it worse by forcing men to pay for the harem. Like, this is what this individual towards an individualistic reproduction, that is arguing for men to pay for the harem. Well, again, whenever we get into this kind of like the Bronze Age, the Byzantine Empire, like whenever we get the Ottoman Empire, whenever we get into this strong harem kind of relational web separation, we're done for. And it corrects itself, because we lose the ability to construct this much surplus. It's self-correcting. The correction isn't great. I wish we could avoid it, but that would require telling women that they don't get to have luxury, a certain amount of luxury they don't deserve. And once we evolve the ability to do that, we'll probably be a spacefaring nation or spacefaring race. Once we actually get women under control, we're probably, we're going to end up on the stars, because this is the continuous thing that undermines human progress. Is women become addicted to comfort, and then they get up their own asses, and they crater the whole thing. All right.
All right. The other thing is that this redistribution stuff it's doomed anyway. Men are leaving the workforce. They're doing the bare minimum for themselves, and they can't take money. You can't get blood from a stone. So,
and
but
feminists
okay, next
justifying it by saying that men wanted to oppress women, so they never had the right to want family in the first place.
Yeah.
And until you break that framing, we'll never get to the actual meat of the matter, which is that men want to be dependable. They want, because women want them to be dependable. And if you don't allow that to happen, you don't get relationships and you don't get children. All right. Sorry, Brian. Keep going.
It's all right. Novafan then says for another $1, my thinking is if the commies run out of productive men to be their slaves, the surviving women will be in fierce competition to survive in a harem as there's too many women getting the free gibs. Well, they'll just put the women to work too, you know. That's one thing that they did.
That presumes that this corporate government collusion can maintain itself indefinitely.
Yeah.
That's like once women pull off from the substrate, right? Once they stop relating to reality and they start perpetuating ideas that have no relation to reality, it's only a matter of time before they completely destroy the productive layer that they rely on. Unfortunately, the relational layer seems to have evolved to control the productive layer, to appropriate from the productive layer. But that control is its own, like it's a double-edged sword, because it also means that the relational layer can completely separate, becomes completely self-referential, and then destroy the thing that it relies on. I don't know if, I mean, this is clear to me, but I know that I'm very abstract in my thinking, and I apologize, guys. It's essentially what it is what happens is everybody starts rent seeking on the productive base. Nobody ends up being productive. Everybody's just rent seeking on demand, on the demand for things. Nobody's actually constructing the things that feed the demand, and then it all implodes because nothing is being made. And you can't run a society on abstractions. Eventually you have to hit something concrete and make something. Okay, sorry. I don't even know if that helps. Shall we? Did you finish?
I got one more.
Okay.
Roboto gives us $1 and says, Alison, do you believe that there was no consent outside of Christianity? You may be giving feminism too much credit for the fall of civilization.
Yeah, but it's not like Christianity explicitly made it like in order for a relationship to be sanctified that both parties had to consent to it. So kin structure is not about both parties consenting to it. The marriage broker, I guess they both consent to it, but it's not really, it's like they changed that. That's one of the big revolutions that Christianity created, is that the man and the woman has to consent to the relationship. It's not just arranged by their kin. So am I giving feminism too much credit for the fall or the destruction of pair bonding? I think I'm giving exactly the amount of credit that feminism deserves based on what I'm researching. If feminism, like if Western feminism is culpable, and it looks like it is, for the cratering of South Korea and also the cratering of the East Bloc countries, right? Then I would say that yes, it has a contributing factor. And I think also, I mean, it's right there. Heterosexuality is the site of women's oppression. That's going to have an effect. What else would you consider to have? I mean, yes, modernity also has effect on declining birth rates, but I think that you have to look at the examples, and the big example is again the post-Soviet Eastern countries, right? The post-Soviet bloc. So they already had the kind of feminism that brought women into the workplace, but didn't have the anti-family, anti-man thing. Because in the Soviet system, the system itself was the remedy for property, which was the source of women's oppression. So it was already done. Women's repression was solved by the Soviet system, so it was no longer there. So it was all about getting women into the workplace, getting women into education, etc. So you already have that high degree of women's participation. You already have that more modernized economy in some ways, and you still have a at replacement level reproduction, and then you introduce Western feminism and it all goes to hell. I think that's a pretty strong indictment of Western feminism. So, I mean, I could get into this more. It's difficult just off the top of my head. But that is the evidence that I have. It's, again, also in South Korea, same thing. All right, let's keep going.
All right. Dylan gave us $10. Sorry, they're still coming in. And says, when we get women under control, we will then be a spacefaring species. Suddenly, all those negative leftist Elon hating comments on all the SpaceX Starship videos make sense. Okay. So now we'll get into the article.
Actually, before we do, can I do?
All right.
I also have some thank you, a thank you, or some thank yous. I would like to thank Blob of Goo, who put in, or actually Vesa supported to the tune of $250.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Amazing.
And Stephanie supported to the tune of $10. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, all right, all right.
And I really appreciate that. And if you would like to join our supporters, because this is the last day to make sure that we can continue to bring you this content, please go to feedthebadger.com/support and put a few shekels in the hat for myself, Brian, and Hannah, and HBR for the month. We need an additional 1,635 to go. So please get those support in. We are, it's getting down to the wire. I know some of you like to leave it to the last moment. A little bit of brinksmanship, maybe it's exciting. But anyway, feedthebadger.com/support to make sure we can continue to bring you this show. And feedthebadger.com/justthetip if you want to comment on anything that we're saying, and badgernation.online if you want to join us in our community. Everything is in the low bar as well, guys. All right, let's keep going. Brian, let's
All right, so we're starting the article now. It's basically we're on the section.
I was going to say fight me on marriage before Christianity in Europe, but I am aware that no, we do need to move on. But my fight me for that though is all sources for like Anglo-Saxon paganism that we have, the pre-Christian stuff, all emphasizes the need for wit when it comes to winning the affections of women, and to not believe the lies of maidens because they are very wishy-washy in the things that they want. So you have to be strong, decisive, and witty in order to acquire their permission for you to marry them. Arranged marriages were these sort of higher up arranged marriages were only things for the aristocratic layer of those societies. Yeah. Everyone else, it was just you find people that you like and you go from there.
That was
which coincidentally
is
exactly what happened as well when Christianity did start taking over in Europe, because it culturally nothing changed. It was just like the religion that was over the top of it.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
All right, so we're on the section. We finished last time the the effects of this on men. Now we're going to look at the future of free women. We are currently in a situation where gender challenges have been reversed in some regard. Based on our investigation of Western mating of the past millennium, we view feminism primarily as a means for achieving individual freedom. That is, individual mate choice made possible by women's economic independence and reliable birth control. In many literary works from between the second and third sexual revolutions, both women and men expressed dissatisfaction with arranged marriage and gender inequality. Social vanguards envisioned a future in which both sexes were free to choose their own partners and move on when the relationship had played itself out. But for both sexes to be free, women would have to be able to provide for themselves and not suffer unwanted pregnancies. Women could therefore not achieve parity with men before new technologies made it possible.
Created by men.
Yeah. Should I keep going, or do you want to say something to that paragraph?
Well, to speak to Teal'c's point, yes, pagan cultures also had, like, I talk about how Roman, like when you were in like just the mass of Roman citizens, they would create relationships through free individual choice too. And like you said, pagan cultures also had that. So why are we saying that feminism created that for women when it's been reliably a European thing for millennia?
Good question.
Yeah, that's
Because
not.
feminism is when good things. If it's not
Yes.
feminism, then it's not good things.
Yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. And also, men were reliant on women's domestic work in the past, just like women were reliant on men's work outside the home in the past, because men and women are dependent on each other, and it's in sort of an intra-relationship. So you are just talking about one period of time. So that, again, this is like the universe began in the 50s. This paragraph is basically assuming that the universe began in the 50s. Because the idea that individual mate choice made possible by women's economic independence. So that requires as its baseline that everything began in the 50s with women being able to become house concubines that didn't contribute to the domestic arrangement materially, that didn't contribute financially or materially to the household. That's something that started in the 50s, and maybe in like Victorian era England in certain very prosperous parts of the country. Like that's a very rare thing. And to say that, take that as the baseline that women are provided for completely by men and only have to do like a couple hours work a day and fill the rest of their time with soap operas and consciousness raising and romance novels, instead of going to the library or adult education or anything like that. That is wrong, right? So do you see what I'm saying? They're starting from a position of women's economic dependence on men that never existed prior to the 50s because it wasn't possible. They didn't have the wealth and luxury to even make that possible. So the whole dependence of women on men was a gift men gave them through their industry. And then they're being able to not have to give birth was, again, to separate sex from actual giving birth is another thing that men gave women. And that's all like it's, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's just keep going. It just seems so freaking disingenuous.
Well,
Yeah.
it is something that you also just have to take into account, like, I'm going to highlight again, this is pure modernity here speaking. Even if you go to like the absolute upper classes of pre-industrial revolution, the women are still expected to do things. There's a theory in politics, it's actually in Political Ideals by Chamberlain, and he talks about how monarchy and aristocracy, that there's generally monarchy, but it can be applied to aristocracy in general, that there's a transcendental layer to them, that they embody all of the good things, they embody all of the best things, they embody the because like sort of God's representative on earth for kings and people like that. So they actually don't have the freedom to do whatever they want whenever they want, because they have to be this sort of on earth representation of all of the best and the most noble things that humans can be. Now, we know that a bunch of them didn't do that, but a lot of them tried. That was sort of the aim of doing it. But if you look at the women in those sorts of positions as well, even they did not sit around doing nothing at all. Even if you were a queen or a king, it's like, oh, you sit around doing absolutely nothing, you're of no use to anything. No, even in those situations, they were expected to know things like not only how to run the household and to get the servants, so they had to manage logistics, but even on personal levels, they were expected to know how to do things like play an instrument, compose a song, be able to write poetry, to sing, to even things like flower arranging, even things like that. Very important for things like what's the word I'm looking for? Negotiations between states and things like that. Actually, things like decor were very important for that because it carried with it a lot of implications as to your status and the message that you were sending to potential allies. So it was actually really important, little jobs like that. And these were things that women were expected to do. So even the most upper class of women, they didn't sit around doing absolutely nothing. Because it's like, oh, we're at this gathering. No, you need to be able to like dance with the nobles of something else, because that's actually a very important diplomatic thing for you to do. You need to be able to speak multiple languages. That is your job in the house. You don't actually just sit on a chaise-longue eating brioche all day. No, you get up, you learn how to play the piano, you learn what all of these dance moves are, you compose your sonnets, you read them to people, and you back up negotiations.
Yeah.
All right, back to the article or this paper.
Yes, although I can
okay.
see from the next couple sentences that I am going to rant.
All right, let me just do the paragraph because we're already 15 minutes till. So, men today are in a similar position. Free women exclude a growing proportion of men from pair bonding, and they wield the reproductive power that the patriarchy had seized through arranged marriage and female subordination. To achieve parity, men must place their faith in tomorrow's reproductive technologies, just like women had to for centuries. Rely on future technologies? Perhaps this perspective can make experiments with individualistic reproduction more salient also for men. After all, the societies that steer toward demographic collapse belong to us all. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay, first of all, what I was trying to get at before is men are creating the preconditions for all of this. They gave women liberation from work, and then women were like, you're oppressing us. And that's what this guy has said. Like before the 50s, men and women both had to contribute to the family for it to even function. Right? So they were interdependent. It wasn't a situation where women were financially completely dependent on men because nobody could offer that kind of luxurious position to anyone. All right. So men created women's luxury. They freed them from work, and then the women were like, you're oppressing us from taking us from work. All right. So then men created the system that women could go back to work in whatever way that they felt was avocado toast, was complementary to their beliefs about themselves, was not work that's, you know, hard or dirty or dangerous, but work that feels like it gives you status and satisfaction. So then men created that, and men created the ability to do that with the freaking birth control pill. And at every step, men have facilitated what women said they wanted. And yet this, what does he say? So patriarchy has seized reproductive power, seized through arranged marriage and female subordination. And again, arranged marriage doesn't exist. It hasn't existed outside of aristocratic families in the West for millennia. Right? So what the hell is he even talking about here? Arranged marriage and female subordination. And again, this is just like 0 years, the 50s, when men finally were able to liberate women from work. And that was men's oppression of women, right? Like literally that's how, and that comes directly from the Red Stockings Manifesto, framing men doing the work, buying the devices, and having the industrial food production that liberated women from domestic labor almost entirely, to the point where domestic labor is like a 2-hour-a-day job from a 12-hour-a-day, 6-day-a-week job. Men did that, and then women turned around and said, this is oppression in the Red Stockings Manifesto. You are actually deriving benefit from our luxurious position liberated from work. Men are deriving benefit from it, some benefit, like, and the Marxist feminists, again, I'm going to bring this up again, Barrett and Bremer Ramis and Young, all tried to look at this situation and derive male benefit from it and failed. And they reported the null, at least Barrett and Young did. They reported, no, we can't seem to derive, the materialism, the material dialectic says we need to find the benefit, locate the benefit, and it was located in the capitalist class with the Marxists. So the capitalist class is extracting from the labor class, and they're gaining a benefit from it. And you can sort of see that, because the capitalist class is richer. So some benefit is accruing to them, some material benefit. So you can almost see that. I would argue that it's not, they're taking the risks, right? So maybe they do deserve some kind of additional benefit from it, but whatever. But then the Marxist feminists try to apply that to the family and the relationship between men and women, and literally they could not find the benefit. They couldn't find the material benefit for men. Like Barrett's like, yeah, I can't seem to locate it. Right? And then Bremer and Ramos are like looking at where Barrett tried to derive this stuff and say, oh, well, these are all the problems with it. But we're not going to embrace the null, right? We aren't going to say, yeah, we can't seem to derive the material benefit that men get for providing for women, because obviously the material benefit lands on the woman, right? She's the consumer, she's the one spending his money, and she's the one with the free time. So by all measures, she is the bourgeois. She's the bourgeoisie. She is the capitalist class extracting from the man, if we're going to look at it from a materialist perspective. But that can't be so, because we know from our feelings of resentment, that it is us women who must be oppressed. So we're just going to ignore the null. That's why nobody knows about this. See, these Marxist feminists who tried to derive patriarchal benefit materially, they're never cited anymore. That's why nobody knows about them. And they don't know that they actually found this big fat null, which was solved, incidentally, by standpoint theory. Oh, women just have women's ways of knowing, which is why women's feelings are superior to men's facts. We don't need to prove that there is some kind of material reality to our claims that we're oppressed. We just feel oppressed. Therefore, we are. And nobody gets to stop them and say, are you actually feeling oppressed or bored? Huh? Which is it? Betty Friedan's problem of no name. Yeah, it's called boredom. It's called the inability of entertaining yourself. Maybe you should have tried going to the library instead of your consciousness raising coffee clatches where you determined that your boredom was actually oppression, right? Anyway, so that's the whole situation for that. When he says that that men wielded the reproductive power that patriarchy had seized through something that didn't exist in the West for like millennia. Right? That's what he's reflecting on. And again, nobody quotes or references the Marxist feminists because they failed to find what this guy's asserting. So this is actually, you know how it's not cited? It's not cited because it would cite to a null. And in any kind of legitimate science, he wouldn't be asserting this. Somebody on his peer review or her peer review committee would say, hey, actually, that's a null. They didn't actually manage to derive material benefit for men. But that's not how feminism works, because the feeling is all they need. They don't need facts. They just need feeling. That's all they need to be true, to have it, everything be correct, is that they feel this way. So they're special. The rules of science don't apply to them. They find a null, and then they just paper over the null with standpoint theory.
For people who want to know how and why that happened, it's Harding, 1986. Harding is the one that labeled science as patriarchal, and therefore the entirety of science is a biased male endeavor, which seeks to marginalize women's voices and make them unreliable, and the idea that objectivity itself is a patriarchal bias. That's why she actually said the only basis of unbiased knowledge in the world is women's own direct experience, which is what standpoint theory is. Just
and then
so people are aware.
Harsock offered an explanation for why men don't have the ability to understand human relationships, and that is because, well, men aren't human.
They have a biological need to tyrannize women and children. That was Firestone, by the way.
Yeah.
The importance of the patriarchy has seized the means of production through this thing. There is actually a very important thing where Firestone actually said seize the means of reproduction. It's actually something she kind of imagined. I'll just read a little bit here. why the hell not? It's only a sentence. Firestone argues that changes in technology produce the capacity for change in the mode of reproduction, in much the same way that Marx argued that changes in the forces of production created the possibility for the emergence of the next mode of production. Firestone contended that women had to seize the means of reproduction in order to achieve this transformation, a part of our argument often glossed over by those who criticize her for naively optimistic technological determinism. And that comes from Firestone's view of historical materialism, which is Marxism, and the essay which that paragraph there sort of references, which isn't cited in the book here, is actually her book, her essay, The Dialectic of Sex. And The Dialectic of Sex is one of the ones which said the nuclear family is a site of oppression and that it was a recent invention. That she was one of the ones who said, oh yeah, this is a bourgeois construct. And within The Dialectic of Sex, she actually says that basically men's biology requires them to tyrannize women and children. It's actually also in this book, Theorizing Patriarchy, somewhere where it says that I can't remember exactly where, and I'm not going to look it up right now because we don't have long left, but it is in there. There is actually like an underlying bio-truth to feminism, which says that men have a need, a biological basal need to oppress women and children, which becomes women by default.
Yeah. Yeah, and Harsock's proposal is that it's not biological. The thing is, they wanted to keep the power of biology without having to answer to constructing a bioessentialist demonization of a group, which, you know, acquired a bad taste in people's mouths as a result of some 20th century activities that will go unnamed. But yeah, so they wanted to change that from the radfem bioessentialist argument that men have a innate biological drive to dominate women to a social constructivist argument, which is something that Hartsock was trying to present. And the constructivism is that through the process of trying to differentiate from his mother, a boy severs himself from like human compassion, the milk of human kindness, from human loyalty and love. So he severs himself from true relationships with his fellow humans, thus loses his ability to understand or sympathize or want to help anyone but himself, and thus becomes a dominator. So that's how Hartsock took it from a bioessentialist assertion to a social constructivist assertion. But again, the assertion still has the power of a biological explanation because it's one-to-one to every man, regardless of their cultural upbringing or class or religion or ethnicity or language they speak. They're all patriarchal oppressors. And they've never identified the real socialization that caused it. I mean, even Hartsock was rejected at some point because it blames women. The blame could land on women. Mothers. Anyway, it's all, and again, all of this assumes as its ground that men oppress women by making them dependent, right, on men, which wasn't something that happened before the incredible economic prosperity that enabled housewives, homemakers, house concubines, right? That incredible economic prosperity created a situation in which men could make women completely dependent on them economically. And that's where the oppression began. Because men liberated women from work. That's where the oppression began. And nothing exists before that, even though they talk about things. This guy talks about things existing before that. But he apparently has no clue of the actual things that existed before that. Because at no time in human history were people prosperous enough for men to induce that level of complete dependence, economic dependence on themselves in women. So basically, women's oppression started in the 50s, guys. According to Radfems, but you know, also it somehow also was before then, even though the conditions didn't exist to create that level of dependence, this oppression by men. All right,
I'm reading one more paragraph, but
okay,
that's all I can do today, so I have to pick up Lindsay. For modern women, the stakes are similarly large. Not only does the fertility crisis deprive many women of having the children they desire, instead regulating or relegating them to involuntary singlehood and childlessness, but from a feminist perspective, it is important to remember that the countries with low fertility are mostly those in which emancipated women are free to choose their own partners. As we explored, this unique level of mating agency underpins the female choice fertility paradox, which has captured gender equal nations in the post-pair bonding fertility trap. So,
Yeah, this is actually like the comment I think by Mr. Roboto that I ascribe too much to feminism. Well, the alternative is to say that this is correct, that when women are free to choose, they don't choose men. Therefore, the only way to increase human fertility is either to take away women's choice, which probably our society will never do, it'll just implode, or to keep pushing the marginalization of men and just let women reproduce with sperm donors and have men pay for it.
I'm actually
Or
just going to call it, I think the next step of this feminist nonsense with all this stuff is going to be, not only are they going to acknowledge hypergamy exists, they're going to say it's good, actually.
that's kind of what this paper is saying.
Oh, God. Of course.
That they are basically saying, look, women, a lot of women only want a small percentage of men, so why don't we let those men impregnate all those women and just like make the other men pay for those kids? Let's cuck like 80% of the population of the male population, right?
and that's going to make the world, that's going to make, and here's the thing, everybody's like, oh well, they're removing the dysgenic men from the population, but they're not, because this is a completely artificial reality. Women were never evolved to reproduce without men. So if you are constructing a situation where you are removing the incentive to reproduce with men who are willing to provide for women, you're degrading our species value. You're degrading our species, the thing that makes our species our species. That isn't improving anything. Right? If every woman reproduces with Tyrone, who does not actually invest in his children or his community, how is that improving the species? Just because she can, because we've constructed this artificial reality. And that's even setting aside the fact that women don't. That single women reproducing with Tyrone will lead to our extinction, because there are not enough single women willing to do it in the first place, even if you pay for it. The assumption at the heart of all of this is that men's dependability is oppression, right? That is, feminists literally attacked the thing that unlocks women's fertility, which is a dependable male partner, right? That's my thesis about all of this, is that women don't have children unless they feel like they're in a relationship with a man who's dependable in some way. Right? That unlocks women's fertility. So you can give them a situation where they have all the resources and all the access to Tyrone that they want, which we already have for the most part. And women are still not being fertile. Like, single women still aren't reproducing at anywhere near the rate of married or cohabiting women. You could do that, but what's mostly likely is that you will crater the rest of our ability to have children, because the premise is wrong. You didn't liberate women. Feminism didn't liberate women. Okay? It did not liberate women. It just removed from their lives removed from a majority of women's lives the one thing that would make them have children, which is a relationship with a man that they find dependable on some level. And dependable men are not dysgenic. Tyrone isn't a superior specimen. A man with lacking half of what makes him a man isn't a superior specimen of manhood. Okay. Sorry, my dog was really distracting me, so I may have lost the thread a bit there. And
That's
I know,
all right.
Brian,
Yeah,
that we need
I do.
to.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I got a couple of super chats I should read really quick, and then Yeah. So Roboto gives $1 and says, princesses could sit around and do nothing. Princesses had to serve in the military for a time in the upper classes. Outside the royal setting, such rules did not really exist outside of tradition/ritual. And then Dylan gives us a super chat for 10 and says, children need both a mother and a father within a tribe to raise them for their mental health. That's how we evolve, no matter the model. No other model will do. Artificial wombs will create mentally damaged children. Maybe that's the point. Widovern Slots gives us $10 and says, happy Friday. I don't have a PayPal, so here's some YouTube money instead, LOL. And Roboto then gives another $1 and says on Rumble, do you know the women who wear the rings around their neck? The reason for that is men like long necks. Second, to make their women less attractive to outsiders. Feminists would call that oppression. Well, they do. Yeah. Okay. That's it. That's all the super childs and stuff.
All right. So we didn't get very far today.
Sorry.
No, that's not your fault.
No, it's my fault. I accept all responsibility for I am a man. Actually, no, wait. I have to blame you, Alison. We're holding you responsible. That's the framework we need to use. It's your fault, Alison. You are the worst thing about Honey Badger Radio.
Yeah, I get told that quite a bit. And so it's I can't. There's no further to go down. So, it just rolls off my back. Well, anyway, so if you would like to support myself, the worst thing about Honey Badger Radio, as well as Brian and Hannah and HBR generally, please go to feedthebadger.com/justthetip, not just the tip, support. Feedthebadger.com/support. I guess we'll have to just continue this. I mean, it has been what, 6 weeks now of doing this. But this is basically, guys, this is the culmination of everything. This is it. This is the epicenter. It is both recognizing the marginalization of men, bringing in exactly what created the fertility crisis in the first place, and then advocating for more of it. So this is it. This is the penultimate. This is the, or not the penultimate. This is the ultimate expression of the Red Stockings Manifesto in our society. And instead of course correcting, Cambridge is advocating doing more of the thing that made the problem in the first bit. More of the hair of the dog that bit, huh, guys? Surely that will solve things. So anyway, if you want to support the show,
all of the insanity that we are seeing, all of this is what happens when we allow women off the bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They go absolutely mad. And there is exactly one solution to this, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to propose it. We need to repeal women.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry to inform you, women. All right. So if you want to support the show, feedthebadger.com/support. If you want to send us a message at any time after the show is over, feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Please do put your support in, because we are at like 12 hours left for the fundraiser. So we're in the last hour. We still have like 1,600 to go. So please do put that support in. Otherwise we won't, we'll have to wind down our work and do something else. Nobody wants that. I mean, who's going to investigate the Marxist feminists, like this hidden argument that never saw the light of day, because they don't cite it anymore. Modern feminists do not cite this argument, or not argument, but this debate between Marxist feminists and radfems over the concept of patriarchy, nor do they cite the fact that the Marxist feminists attempted to derive patriarchy, or men's benefit, from their relationship to women and found a big fat null. Nobody cites that. It just was allowed to wash into the history and just ignored and papered over with standpoint theory. Like, who's gonna bring this all up? So support the show, feedthebadger.com/support. I'm gonna hand this back to Brian to take us out.
Okay, well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we talked about on the show today, and share the video, because sharing is caring. Thanks so much for coming on this episode of Maintaining Frame, where we're looking at the the toward individualistic reproduction article, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.